Joining me after these dramatic events overnight at number 10 Downing Street is Greg Sheridan, foreign editor at The Australian. Greg, thank you for joining me. I feel like you could ask this every month at the moment, but this time it seems real. Is Boris Johnson finished?
Yeah, I think probably he is, Andrew. I think it has the stench of death about it now. The resignation of senior cabinet ministers is normally the critical moment. That was the moment for Margaret Thatcher. It was the moment for Theresa May. It's a very old government now. We forget that it's been in office for, 12 and a half years. It has the feel of the last years of John Major about it, just endless scandal, endless internal recrimination. It's a terrible tragedy because Johnson is so gifted and he was very, very pro-Australian. He was a father of AUKUS and all the rest of it. But I think he's gone.
Well, it's a big call for the Chancellor in particular to resign, isn't it? Do you think either Rishi Sunak or Sajid David are doing this because they want the job, or is it just on principle? You don't often see that in politics.
Look, they're both good men. I've no doubt about that. Johnson, in a sense, is a good man too. But of course, it's both. They want the job. Absolutely. Sajid Javid and Rishi Sunak both were leadership contenders. I think neither of them is likely to get the job in the current circumstance. Sunak has the enormous disability that he has a rich, successful wife who didn't, use the UK as her taxation domicile. So I think that's ruled him out. Sajid Javid never quite makes it at the absolute top. Johnson has a pretty weak cabinet. He's kept a lot of strong figures out of cabinet in order to have no alternatives to him. But everybody's circling, everybody's looking for position, ambition and principle are all mixed up. One of the tragedies of Johnson is that he gets the great big calls of history, in my view, right. Brexit, going after northern working class voters and all that. But then he just cannot bring his own personal behaviour into line with what is expected in high office. He has a reflex for telling lies and he's very reckless.
And he's really been tarred with that brush, hasn't he? Well, who do you think will be his successor, if not those two? And will it mean anything for Australia in terms of AUKUS, climate change and the free trade agreement?
Yeah, I think it does mean a lot for Australia. I think Liz Truss is an outside chance. Jeremy Hunt could be a chance. There's a brilliant backbencher, Tom Tugendhat, if they wanted to go for an absolute sort of real roll of the dice outsider. Whereas if they go for an establishment figure, Jeremy Hunt would be like going to John Major after Margaret Thatcher. I mean, he did steady the ship and so on, but he also led them into their biggest defeat in many, many decades. I think there are a lot of consequences for Australia. I think Don Farrell was wildly overselling what we could possibly get from a free trade agreement from Europe. But I think Britain, and, they take 100 million years to come about and so on, and they're very, very marginal. Britain's free trade agreement will persist, but Johnson was addicted to an Indo-Pacific role for Britain. Partly this was part of his Brexit ideology and also looking for a post-Europe role and all that. The next Prime Minister won't have any of that. We're probably going to go for an American sub, which means the Brits don't make any money out of AUKUS, so that'll mean that they won't be as invested in it as Johnson was.
So and you think it could fall over?
Because of,
you think AUKUS could fall over?
I don't think it'll fall over. No, I wouldn't say that, Andrew. I don't think it'll fall over, but I just think the British Prime Minister will have less enthusiasm for it. Johnson also was genuinely a lover of Australia, even more than Tony Blair. He lived here for a while as a young man. He loved the Australian manner, the Australian way of life, and Australia kind of represented to him, the good things a Brexit Britain could be. And the next Prime Minister is going to want to be the anti-Johnson, so he will probably emphasise Europe more, and also the Russia threat means that they're going to swing their security focus back to Europe anyway. And if they're not building a submarine for us, it just becomes, it's not going to fall over, but it's going to be a much lower priority, I suspect. British Labor is ambivalent about it. There'll be a campaign on nuclear non-proliferation grounds. The Chinese will be active in social media against it. So I think Johnson might represent the sort of the high watermark of enthusiasm for Australia. It's always a bit fanciful of us anyway to think Britain is going to have a big role in Asian security. It'll be helpful, much better to have it helping than not. We can use all the friends we can get. But Britain is not going to be a determining factor in Asian security. And the next British Prime Minister will be less concerned with Australia, I think, than Johnson was.
Greg, thanks so much for your time.
Thanks, Andrew.